Hey guys, college football update, week 6. As always, we're going to start with Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and then we're going to move on from there. So let's start with the Notre Dame game. Honestly, really, really incredible game for Notre Dame to win. To be honest with you, these are not the games that Notre Dame normally wins. So let me just give you some factoids here that a lot of folks just don't know. Notre Dame has only been 6-0 12 times since 1964. So, it's always very funny, because when I tell people I'm a Notre Dame fan, they're like, oh, you guys are good all the time. And I'm like, we're not, actually. Notre Dame's not been very good in, 30 years. I mean, there's certain seasons sprinkled in here or there, but the reality is, even when they went, 9-2 or 10-2 and went to the Fiesta Bowl, lost to Oregon State one year, 41-9, lost to Ohio State one year, 34-24, I think. Lost, a couple of years ago, 44-28 to Ohio State. I mean, they get blown out in these bowl games. So it's, as a Notre Dame fan, it's great that they make it to these games. But if they don't win it, I mean, how is that exciting? So the reality is that this is kind of new territory. I mean, as a child, I always thought that Notre Dame was going to be great because during the Lou Holtz era, they were great. I mean, they were phenomenal. They were one of the best teams in college football. It's really taken a very long time for Brian Kelly to get his team to be able to win a game like this in a hostile environment. I'm not going to say Virginia Tech is cream of the crop whatsoever. Still a hostile environment, and they were still ranked, albeit I'm not sure they should have been, but they were still ranked. So the reality is Notre Dame has beaten 3 ranked teams. Still great. I mean, still something to be happy about. So as a fan, it's real. I'm living the dream. I mean, they are doing certainly way better than I would have thought they would have done. If you listened to any of my other updates, I said they were going to lose 3 games. Still obviously possible, but they're trending to where they wouldn't lose 3 games at this point, so that's great. So let's talk about my top 4 teams. I left Georgia off last week. Idiotic of me to do that. So let me give you my top 4, and it is in this order based on what I've been able to see so far. So I've got Alabama number 1. By far, it's not even close. And again, I won't go into it, but you guys have heard me talk about them before. This is an absolutely incredible team. They're stacked, frontwards and backwards. It's just absolutely unbelievable. I've got Clemson at 2, and again, I'm leery of Trevor Lawrence as the quarterback. I just am. I mean, it's tough to just hand the keys over to freshmen. I understand, Georgia fans are going to say Jake Fromm. They did it with him last year. I get it, but I don't know that that's the norm. It's definitely not something. I mean, Jamel Holloway at Oklahoma, that comes to mind. I think Jalen Hurts was a redshirt freshman, I think, when they won the national championship for, at Alabama. So it's not like it happens all the time. I can think of periods of time in college football where it does happen, but it's not the norm. So it kind of freaks me out a little bit, but obviously destroyed Wake Forest. So, perhaps put it in the hands of the defense and just let him do what he does, and they'll be fine. So I'll put Clemson at 2. I've got Ohio State 3. I'm a little on the fence with Ohio State. They had a bit of trouble with Indiana in the first half. Look it up, though. I mean, Indiana, these games can either be an absolute blowout. This is going to sound like a stupid comment, but it can be an absolute blowout or it's a very close game. There's usually not necessarily this kind of tweener game that they had this time. When they play at Indiana, Ohio State just doesn't get up for it. So there's a lot of times where that game can actually come down to the last possession. And Ohio State either stopping Indiana or Ohio State scoring to win. So wasn't at all shocked that Indiana gave them a game. They usually do that. But I still have Ohio State at 3 just based on their body of work. I've got Georgia at 4, so you Georgia people, I'm not a Georgia hater, although I am going to talk about Georgia in a second because I'm going to talk about the playoffs. But I definitely have Georgia at 4. Them and Ohio State, I think, could flip-flop. I think the Georgia-Alabama game could be a somewhat de facto national championship game. So we'll see what happens there. But I definitely have them at 4. Let's talk about Texas. It was a good win for Texas. I'm not going to take that away. But my thing is, I just have zero respect for the Big 12. I mean, they don't play defense at all. None of those teams play defense. It's just ludicrous. I mean, if you watch the game, they're just running around out there and the chickens with their heads cut off on defense. It's ludicrous. I mean, and of course, Oklahoma fires Stoops today, their defensive coordinator, because he's awful. But he's always been awful. But I mean, nobody in the Big 12 plays defense anyway. Why do you care? I mean, just go out there and try and outscore everybody because that's what you do anyway. So, Yes, good win by Texas. Do I think they're back? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, it's the Big 12, so I think if they played in SEC school or maybe even a Clemson, an upper tier ACC school, something like that, I just don't think they'd be able to pull it out. So no, I do not think Texas is back, but it has more to do with the fact that I just have zero respect for the Big 12 and the fact that they don't play defense. UCF, I get a lot of people ask me, what do you think about UCF? Should they be in the playoff? Absolutely not. I love the American Conference. I think it's great. And we can call it the one A Power 5 conference, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is, when you're beating Memphis and Tulsa and teams like this, no, I don't care how much you're beating them by, and I don't care if you're undefeated. Absolutely not. They should not be in the playoff. They are not one of the top 4 best teams. It's a Boise State situation. What's the difference? And I know, but people are going to say, well, Boise State beat Oklahoma. I get it. I do get that. I understand that. I also understand Utah beat Alabama in the day. I mean, these games do happen. Obviously, Central Florida beat Auburn last year. Do you really think Auburn was up for that game? Come on. I mean, this is the stupidest argument. UCF does not have the same talent level as these teams would have. So if you're playing them, 2 or 3 times throughout the year, you're not going to beat them every time. So yeah, they get up for the game. I think it's great that these smaller schools win. I mean, I went to Winthrop, for God's sake, in basketball, and Winthrop beat Notre Dame in the NCAA tournament. I think it's amazing when these smaller schools win. Do I think that Winthrop would beat them every single? Of course not. I don't think they would beat them every time. And maybe that's not the argument, but my argument is they're not a top 4 team, and I would argue that all day long. So put them in the bowl. That's fine. Put them in the top 6, but definitely not in the top 4, and I think it's an injustice. And I think making it, expanding it to 8 is not going to help anything. Arizona State, I'm just going to touch on this, 3-3. I had mentioned before, Herm Edwards was not going to make that much of a difference. I'm standing by it. They're 3-3. They'll be 6-6 or 7-5 at the end of the year. I just do not see Arizona State going 11-2 with Herm Edwards, which really, I mean, if you're going to go 6-6, what's the point? It's the exact same thing you always have. So it just doesn't. Why fire Todd Graham? Save the money. Go 6-6, and just enjoy being Arizona State, and go to the Sun Bowl or wherever they go. Buffalo, I'm going to touch on this. So if you guys don't know this, Lance Leipold is the coach at Buffalo. I'm sure nobody knows this. He was the coach at Division III Wisconsin Whitewater. If you don't know what that is either, you should. Wisconsin Whitewater almost always, year after year, played Mount Union, who is just ridiculous. It's the Alabama of Division III. Let's put it that way. Wisconsin Whitewater won, 7 or 8 Division III national championships in a row. Wisconsin Whitewater is the team that knocked them off of the pedestal. And Lance Leipold left Whitewater a few years back to start coaching at Buffalo. Buffalo, I think, is either 5-1 or 6-1 at this point. I love their quarterback, can't remember his name, but love him. Just really lanky. He's almost like a poor man's Cam Newton or something. It's just very exciting out there. So especially for a MAC team, loving it. So if you're bored and you just want to check out a team that you're like, who is this team? And I never watched them, and you just want to check out something on ESPN, tune into Buffalo. It's an exciting brand of football. I will say their stadium is hideous. Probably one of the worst stadiums in all of Division I. I mean, it's awful. Right up there with Eastern Michigan. The worst one is Louisiana Monroe, but let's not go into it. I mean, you really need to check that out too if you haven't. It's very depressing. I mean, it's just an absolutely awful stadium. Okay, so I had some Ask Roger questions. My playoff killer game, I'll be honest with you, I think it's Notre Dame-Syracuse. That's my thought. I think Syracuse has an opportunity to knock off Notre Dame. It's at MetLife Stadium. Notre Dame's going to be coming off the road trip at Navy, which is San Diego, so they're having to fly from San Diego to New York. I just think that's a tough game, so I'm hating that. No, I do not dislike Georgia, but I will say this. So I'm hearing a lot of people talk about Notre Dame's schedule and the fact that they do not play a championship game. This is the most ludicrous argument I've ever heard in my life, and I'm getting so tired of people saying it. If Notre Dame goes 12-0, they absolutely 100% unequivocally should be in the playoff. And here's my reasoning. Georgia, I'm going to pick on them a little bit, okay? But I can pick on a lot of teams about this. But I'll pick on Georgia for a second. Georgia opened with Austin Peay. They played Middle Tennessee State, and they're going to play UMass. So in reality, they're playing 9 games that matter. The other 3 don't. I understand. You can say Notre Dame played Ball State. Fine. So Notre Dame plays 11 games that matter. Georgia's going to play, they played 9 games that matter if you don't count the other 3, but you know what, let's count one of them, and let's say they play 10 games. So then throw in the championship game of the SEC. That's 11 games. It's the exact same amount of games that Notre Dame would play. And the fact that everybody talks about Notre Dame not playing in a championship game, who cares? If they were in the ACC full time and they played Virginia Tech in the championship game, does it really matter? We just saw what they did to them. So who cares? Who's on the other side of the ACC that Clemson's going to play who's worth anything? Nobody. So I would make this argument all day long. Very tired of it, sick of hearing it. Notre Dame goes 12-0. Absolutely, unequivocally should be in the playoff. But right now, I have them as the 5th best team. That's my thought. So I'll leave you with that. Enjoy the games, guys.